The green leaves of the tree waved gently in the wind, and their rustle sang the song of evening, which would soon cover the land. Slowly the deep black source of life set and started wandering off to the other side of the planet. It was accompanied by chromostars, which were always surrounding the dark matter and would never leave its side. With them, the shine that brightened up the world at daytime started to vanish too. They would just leave a black sky eventually, which would make it hard for people to see. But as soon as the next day would begin, they should return and glow in their most beautiful colors for the life of this side of the planet. Underneath a tree, which had grown on a small hill, rested a girl blessed with blooming beauty. She laid still and took deep breaths in her sleep. Her deep black hair danced in the wind, and the green strands began to slightly glow a little in the increasing darkness. She wore a dress also in a black color that couldn't match her hair's blackness and intensity. Above the dress she was wearing a light jacket in the same color, but almost transparent. Around her neck she had a necklace made of thin black metal, which was so long that its ends reached her belly. The lace was crowned with the deep black crystal. The girl's name was Cheyenne, Cheyenne le Blesse. On her lap rested the head of a wolf-resembling being, with long turquoise sensors that made a nice color contrast to the silver fur. It had its black eyes open and gazed with a worrying look at the girl. Eventually it stood up and made a whining noise, touching the girl with its nose until she opened her eyes. Her eye color was the same as of fresh blood. The girl woke up slowly from its sleep and stared at her trustful four-legged companion with half-closed eyes. Cheyenne didn't seem to know where she was at first, since she was still so sleepy. Silent words came over her lips. "Why did you wake me, Adukas? I was having such a nice dream." The fairy wolf whined guiltily, but then gazed at somewhere far away. He stared at the horizon, hoping that the girl would too. And she did. Following the Adukas' gaze, she now watched the wandering of the chromostars. "Did you just wake me up because of the nightfall? We see that so much, even though it's so beautiful every time anew. When the chromostars vanish beyond the horizon and everything slowly gets dark." Wait, dark? Night? Oh no, this can't be happening. Alucas returned his look to the girl and turned his ears forward in her direction. Finally, the girl seemed to understand. Cheyenne got up and searched the surrounding with her eyes to find her horse Falconheart. "I promised grandfather to help him get his market stand tidied up. I was supposed to help him sell as well. Arukas, why did you not wake me earlier?" The fairy wolf whined concerned. Cheyenne sighed and bowed down to her companion. She stroked his back fur, and he knew she wasn't mad at him. "It's all right, it's not your fault that I forget the time, huh? But now we really need to hurry home. I hope grandfather had some business at the market and could make some money. I hope he's not too angry with me." Cheyenne got back up and walked a few steps away from the tree to be able to look better for her horse. She whistled and Adokas barked loudly. A brief moment of silence followed by slow hoofbeats from the back of the hill. She turned around and saw her dark brown horse coming up to her. In its short mane it had dark blue, long strands that looked like Adokas sensors, and it could canter incredibly fast. But she didn't know exactly if it's really sensors or something else. But it was a fact that the horse wasn't a normal one. But Cheyenne knew that anyway, since she rescued it from a research facility. Ever since that day, it gave her its utmost trust. There you are, finally! I was starting to get worried. Now we need to really hurry up and get back home as fast as we can. Can you do it? I'll reward you with an apple. Cheyenne whispered in the horse's ear and smiled. Falconheart snorted and started to dance impatiently. Guess that means you're ready. With a swing, she hopped onto the saddle and remembered how much she had to practice that because she had never enough power to get onto the horse since it's so big. She sat up and asked Falconheart to start moving. The chestnut stallion lifted its front legs for a brief moment before starting to trot. Cheyenne could feel his incredible power in his movement, almost like a ticking time bomb that would explode any moment now. But exactly that was her goal. With that speed, they would be home in no time. But before she sped up her horse, she turned her head around to check where Adokas was. In just that moment, the fairy wolf ran in front of Falconheart and startled the big animal a little. All right, let's go. Cheyenne gave the signal to canter, and the sensitive Falconheart jumped ahead and started galloping. Within a few seconds, they left the hill behind, and they came across the path they had used to get here. Forests and fields were blurrily passing by, almost like they weren't real. Instead, it felt like a dream. But Cheyenne knew the feeling already, and she knew it wasn't a dream. More like dreamful reality. Again it came to her mind how beautiful her life was, even though she had lost her mother right after her birth 17 years ago and never saw her father. But she's got wonderful grandparents who always sacrificed everything they had just to take care of her, ever since she was born. The only thing that really bothered her was that her little family had a hard time paying the taxes. Since they lived in the slums, they had to pay taxes to the king of Exciduma Magna regularly. Even though he had enough money anyways and didn't help his people in any way, unlike a good king would. Sometimes Cheyenne wished to not live in the capital city of this world, Terranox Libertia, but that's how things were and she couldn't change it. Her thoughts were interrupted when they came closer to the village La Sepia. They had to get through this place in order to reach the capital city, but the streets were crowded with people. I forget they had market day here as well. Those people are probably all tidying up their stands. Cheyenne slowed her horse down to a quick trot and tried to think of a tactic to pass the village as fast as possible. Suddenly, Aruka started barking and got the girl's attention. She stopped Falconheart and saw her companion standing a few meters next to her. He pointed his head in the direction of a wooden box which he jumped on seconds later. He barked again and threw a plank down, which landed in a way that someone could just get up to the box he was standing on easily. Arukas entered the rooftop of a house from the box and stumbled to the highest point of which. Huh? You want us to ride on the roofs? You're a genius! Come on, Falconheart, we can easily do that. Cheyenne was proud of the intelligence of her fairy wolf, but the stallion tilted its head and refused a little before walking onto the wooden plank. Arukas waved his tail, turned around, and started trotting over the roof. This is surely the fastest way to cross the village. Carefully the horse took one step after another and laid his ears back. I'll get you 2 apples if you can do this, the girl on its back promised. That was supposedly enough to encourage Falconheart since he jumped ahead, and they were standing on a big box. From this point it was easy to get to the rooftop that was almost the same height. Cheyenne concentrated her look to the front and saw Adukas yawning on one of the rooftops ahead. He just sat there, but got up when he saw the stallion and his girl were getting closer to him. Falconheart stumbled quickly over the roofs, and every time he jumped from roof to roof, Cheyenne feared that they would crash down together with it. But they didn't. Although people started noticing the loud noises coming from the rooftops, but they couldn't make out what exactly made the noises. The stallion now moved quick and had a goal in front of his eyes, which was the end of the rooftops where the silver wolf just chased off a cat. He jumped down and was out of sight. When they reached the end of the rooftops, it was easy for Falconheart to get down, since there were a few boxes standing next to the last house, sorted by size, which made it safe to get down to the earth again. No, that was pure luck. As soon as the horse reached the ground, it started picking up speed again, and before one of the villagers noticed them, they were out of sight already. Arukas was running ahead again. Fairy wolves belong to the fastest being in the world. He could have never even stood a chance on keeping up with Falconheart's speed if it was just a regular wolf. In front of her, Cheyenne now saw the capital city, which was gigantic and built on a huge stone platform-like phenomenon. No one knew exactly how this happened and how its balance worked, since it's home of hundreds of houses and even castles. It's perfectly stable and doesn't crash down. Everything above the stone plate was called Upper City, which is where the rich and middle class lived, and everything underneath it Undercity. The Undercity was built around and in the stone pillar, which got bigger at the foot and smaller, closer to the plate. Down there in the slums at the foot of the pillar was Cheyenne's home. The way they took led them through a little forest, and the trees hid the magnificent capital city. Almost all of them carried apples. Cheyenne remembered the promise she made to her horse. This was the perfect opportunity to collect the 2 treats. She slowed down Falconheart and took her unfoldable bow from the saddlebag. She pushed a little button on it, and it unfolded to full size, which was above 5 times as much as the folded version, and was now a full operational bow. It was almost as big as the girl itself. As soon as she brought her weapon in the right position and laid her finger onto the bowstring, a black arrow appeared. It was surrounded by something that looked like black fire but was not hot. She aimed at 2 apples that were being in a row behind each other and tried to sit as calm as possible on the cantering horse. When the right moment came, she let go of the bowstring and the arrow shot forward super fast. It cut the first apple and right after that the second. In the meantime, Cheyenne had already folded back the bow together and had put it back into the saddlebag. Now she had both her hands free to catch the apples falling from the trees. Perfect timing, could not have been better. She was happy about it and put the treats for her horse into the saddlebag. As soon as she was done with that, a loud thunder sounded and left the world shaking. Falconheart got scared and stopped running immediately. The abrupt loss of speed caused a balance issue for Cheyenne and she fell on the neck of the nervous horse. Frightened and loud it whinnied and lifted up its front legs into the air. Back on earth with all 4 hoofs, it began to dance around, snorted noisily while the girl sat back into the saddle. She whispered in a calm voice to the horse whilst patting his neck. Hey, Falconheart, it's all right. It was just thunder. Calm down. Shh, shh. Then she looked for Adukas. She found him sitting a few meters away at the edge of the forest. He was staring into the distance, but due to the narrow and dense treetops, she couldn't see where his sight was pointed. Again, the growling of the upcoming storm shook the land, but this time the horse remained quiet and calm. The girl on his back gave off a calm and trustworthy feeling and seemed to be not worried about the thunder. Due to this positive aura, Cheyenne could motivate him to go on. The hoofbeats on the ground didn't seem to be of much interest to the fairy wolf, which just twitched its ears and kept on staring in the distance. As soon as he noticed that his owner and her horse came closer, he got up and turned around. He spectated the stallion's long legs and how expansive every step was, especially in the walk, the slowest gait. Cheyenne now could make out the capital city between the tree crowns again. Above her home city were dark blue clouds, which told her that it would be raining soon. Lightnings were to see, and so they had found the source of thunder. Oh, not this too. A thunderstorm is the last thing we need now. She remembered that the last storm wasn't that long ago, and it left its marks on the old house which she lived in. There had been a terrible thunderstorm, and the wind had loosened some rocks above the houses of the Undercity. Some of those stones hit the rooftops, also Cheyenne's home, and her grandfather didn't have the time yet to fix the issue. There was way too much damage on the field to take care of first. The field was the most important possession of the family, since it was the only opportunity to make some money. But almost everything that Cheyenne's grandfather had raised there had been destroyed in the storm. Only very little of grain and vegetables remained in good enough state to sell, but on the market they would only get low prices for their products, since there were a lot of other merchants with better looking foods. The amount of money he would get would by far be not enough to buy new seeds to grow in the field, not even enough to buy some food for the time in between the selling periods, not to think of the taxes they needed to pay. Poor grandfather, as if he hasn't got enough to worry about. But he never takes the help of other people and always feels responsible for everything. I really hope he could sell at least some of the wares and got enough money to buy new seeds. Also, the last storm had turned the wind so that the rain would fall directly into the undercity instead of the upper city, which sometimes works as an umbrella for the people that live down there. Even though it happens a lot, everybody had their hopes up that it wouldn't happen at that time. But the hope had been in vain, and the water came into the houses through the holes in the roofs and flooded the area. The cleanup took 2 days after the event happened, and there are still a lot of things missing. Cheyenne's grandmother lost a cooking pot, which probably was washed away into the river, and by now it should be sunken deep in the ocean. I hope it doesn't rain into the Undercity today, not until all our roofs are fixed. That was another reason for Cheyenne to come home as soon as possible. As if Arukas could read her thoughts, he sprinted forward as she let Falconheart gain speed again. Soon the horse had reached its full speed, and the three of them continued to hurry towards the city. The ground started to be very even and led to a paved street, which again led to a guarded security gate. Everyone who wanted to get into town had to pass through here and show their identification papers. And not even then it was guaranteed that the person could get in. The gate was guarded by 2 soldiers of the knights who didn't have the qualification to be a fully accepted knight to serve the king. This was pure luck for Cheyenne though, and a huge advantage. Since she lived in the despised undercity of the most important city in Terranox Libertia, she had no identification papers and had to trick the soldiers all the time to get through the gate. This was not always a child's play, but there were by far more difficult things to handle in life. But the gate was the only opportunity to get into town, except for someone could fly or build a tunnel like a mole, since the capital city was surrounded by a 5-meter high voltage fence, which meant immediate death at the moment you touch it. Many people lost their lives to this one already. Again, Cheyenne noticed how cruel the king was indeed. Going to such means just to make the life of those who don't belong to the rich and popular hard for them. Poor people don't get ID papers, and the king made it no secret that he hated these worthless, pathetic rats of the undercity. Shouldn't it be the purpose of a king to love and appreciate his people and help them when they're in need? Guide them into a safe and good future? This king is unworthy of his role, an absolute idiot. I really hope he's gonna be thrown off his throne very soon, and then let's hope that the next king will be a better one. Cheyenne now came closer and closer to the gate, but none of the soldiers had noticed her yet. She slowed her horse down again and called back her fairy wolf to her side. He heard her, even though she hadn't made a loud noise. He was now trotting next to the horse. The girl reached for her bow in the saddlebag, and as soon as she put her fingers onto the bowstring, the black arrow appeared again. She aimed at a spot in the grass next to the guards and let the arrow fly away. The noise which it made when it crashed into the earth and the black fog similar to fire attracted the attention of the two knights, and both went to see what was going on with no second thought. "What the hell is that?" I don't know. Let's go check it out." "Hey, you're right. What a brilliant idea you got there. I wish I would be as smart as you too. But shouldn't one of us stay back here at the gate? Could be a trap, you know." I don't know. Let's go together. You got a lot to learn if you think that's a trap." "Beginner." "Oh yes, of course. How could I doubt your experience? Forgive me." Cheyenne and her pets used the opportunity to rush through the gate. One of the soldiers noticed them, but these guys didn't seem to be so bright, based on what she just witnessed, so she wasn't worried that they would come after her. "Hey look, someone just passed through the gate. So much for experience, huh?" I don't know what's your problem, boy. That must have been your imagination. I ain't seen nothing. You getting too hot under that armor of ya or what? Beginner. Learn to do your work before you're assuming things, will ya, idiot?" I'm very sorry, master. You're so right. How could I ever doubt you? It must have been my imagination." Cheyenne couldn't hold back a laughter. Never had she seen such unfit guards before. And their talking was really funny too. They had made it through the gate, and now they would only need to pass the bridge to arrive in the Undercity. Above their heads the night sky was barely visible, also no chroma stars could be seen no more. But since it wasn't pitch black yet, there were supposedly some stars left at the horizon. The lightnings gave evidence that her theory was true, because they lit up the sky with their flashy colors, which meant they were still affected by chroma shine. If there were no chroma stars left in the sky, the clouds and lightnings would be pitch black and one could barely see them at night. You would only hear the thunder growling, but Cheyenne was sure that she could see lightnings in the dark as well, since they felt darker than the night. She could swear on that. Loud thunder shook the earth again, and Falconheart snatched his head into the air, but that's all he would do. His hooves were beating on the wooden bridge, and the river flew wildly and was calming at the same time. At the other side of the bridge, Cheyenne looked up to the sky, but the stone plate took away her sight at the clouds. A strong wind came up, and the grass around her sang a hope-robbing song. The wind will bring the rain to us again, I'm pretty sure of that. Damn it. Cheyenne now passed the first few houses and came to the main path. It was not very broad but very steep and rough. Inside the houses you could see chroma candles, and the chroma lanterns on the way partly lit up the darkness. Some of them were burned out though. The undercity couldn't afford to buy new ones. The chroma lamps in the street lanterns glowed through fragments of chroma stars, which fell from the sky from time to time. But that was such a rare event that researchers took the challenge and invented artificial chroma fragments. And opposite to the real ones, the artificial ones stopped glowing after a while and had to be renewed. Lately, their selling price has been rising drastically, but no one in the Undercity knew why. Artificial chroma fragments used to be very cheap on the market since they were of great need. Many people couldn't see well at night, especially not when they lived in a city where there are glowing lights everywhere, and they got used to it. Cheyenne didn't have a hard time seeing in the dark though. Even in the darkest night she could see very far. Her grandparents kept on saying that that must be a miracle, since they couldn't even see their own hands in front of their eyes at night, let alone see colors in pitch blackness. But logically, Cheyenne couldn't see colors at dark as well, since there would be no chroma shine. But she could see silhouettes and different stages of black in the darkness of the night. Finally, she arrived at the alley which led to her yard. Falconheart jumped the stairs, and that meant that from now on there would be even ground, so no more steep and stony road. Cheyenne's grandparents shared the yard with their neighbor Rosie, an old widow with a good heart. Ever since her husband was killed by the Knights, she lived alone in her big house and had a good relationship with Cheyenne's grandmother. When those two were together, even the old Rosie could laugh, and she is a lot happier when they spend time together. But now she sat by her window on the first floor of her house, and she stared with empty eyes at the girl which was riding into the yard with her horse. Oh my, what happened to her? I haven't seen her so sad in a long time now. And around this time she's usually with my grandmother. How very strange. She jumped off the saddle and tethered the reins of her horse's bridle around the post in front of the barn. One more time she looked up to Rosie, whose rigid gaze resolved. Then she slowly turned her head until she looked at Cheyenne directly in the eyes. She had definitely cried and seemed very disturbed and desperate. But why? The old woman rose proudly from her seat and closed the curtains. What was that? As if she'd seen a ghost. Why did she stare at me like that? And why did she close the curtains all of a sudden? Such strange behavior. That's not the Rosie I know. The girl got a very bad feeling and her heartbeat grew faster. All of a sudden she felt the need to see and hug her grandparents, to know that they are safe. Cheyenne left the stallion in the yard, even though she should have brought him into the barn first to cover him from the rain that was soon to come. But she didn't think of that at that time. She ran to the front door and saw that it wasn't closed, but a little opened. She stood still and noticed some red spots on the door handle. The girl got goosebumps and figured out that it was blood. What? Cheyenne couldn't form a complete sentence. She breathed heavily and fast and started shaking. Her heart felt heavy and seemed to shatter into pieces every moment now. She had to know what happened here, but at the same time she was very scared of it. She wanted to step into the house, but she couldn't. Presentiment was in the air. Adokas came to her side and poked her hand gently, but determining. The girl put aside her fear. This was probably just her imagination, and there was surely going to be a logical explanation for this. Her grandmother would explain everything to her in a second, and made her a hot cocoa to calm her down. Everything's all right. No need to panic. I'm just imagining things. Maybe this is not blood, but... Cheyenne took a deep breather and stumbled a few steps closer to the door. With a loud squeak, the door cut the silence and gave sight into the inner parts of the house. Cheyenne's eyes widened as she saw how much blood there was on the floor. She just stood there, heavily and noisily breathing. "Grandmother? Grandfather?" She cried out for them, but no sound came out of her mouth. Her breathing became faster and irregular. She forgot everything around her, and she didn't know what to do anymore. "Where are you?" Her voice was broken and sounded desperate. There came no answer to her question. She couldn't feel anything anymore, not the cold of the night, not even how exhausted she was by now. "Grandmother? Grandfather? What? Where are you? Grandmother!" Her cries sounded shrill and hysterical. She lost her balance and fell against the door. Her eyes filled with tears, which ran across her cheeks as she closed her eyes. Sobbing, she stood against the front door and asked herself the same question over and over again. What should I do now? Never before she felt this empty and disturbed. Her heart was aching so much that she would just like to scream out in pain. Her legs didn't seem to be able to carry her weight any longer, and she was ready to break down on her knees at any moment. Inside the house it was dark, pitch black. Adukas sat next to Cheyenne. He seemed to want to protect her. From time to time he touched her gently with his nose and tried to comfort her, but the girl just sat there at the entrance door, crying and numb of soul pain. Outside, rain started to fall. Falconheart whinnied as the cold water hit his back. The fairy wolf started shaking. So did Cheyenne, but she wasn't shaking because of the cold. She was right before a mental breakdown, but she would never admit to that, and she tried to be strong. Slowly she got her thoughts back under control and tried to figure out what had happened. Okay, what happened here? A robbery? Housebreaking? Where are they? Why? If only I had been here earlier. If they are dead, then where are their bodies? Are they even dead? Who killed or took them? Maybe there is another explanation for the blood. Will I ever find out? What am I gonna do now? I have to find them. I just have to know what happened. Maybe they need me to save them. Maybe someone saw something. But who? Wait a second. Maybe Rosie saw something. Maybe that's why she was so weird. I have to ask her. Cheyenne slowly got up and almost collapsed again in doing so. She hadn't felt this weak in a long time now. She tried to keep on standing upright and hoped to gain back her balance. Finally she made it, and could stand without leaning against the door again. Suddenly, light hoofbeats sounded from the yard. That's not Falconheart, but a lighter horse. But who? She turned around and hoped that her assumption was correct. The girl went into the yard. The wind had grown stronger and the ice-cold raindrops hit her face. It hurt a little. In front of her, there was a horse, not as big as Falconheart and obviously more delicate and nervous. From the mane and fur of the horse, Cheyenne could tell that it was the mare of her best friend Xaver. Now she could make him out clearly. He jumped off his horse and came up to her. Cheyenne, are you okay? Cheyenne ran towards him and hugged him before he could say more. She started crying desperately in his arms. Xaver! She could only whisper. The friend didn't say nothing and just hugged her back. He always exactly knew how to handle Cheyenne, so she would feel better. His blonde short hair was drenched, also was his clothing. But that didn't matter to Cheyenne at the moment. She was already wet from the rain now as well. But she didn't care. She had other issues to attend to. She was so happy that he was here now, that he came. How did he know she would need him? Maybe he saw something too. Xaver was 18 years old, and ever since they could think, they had been friends. Those two had always done everything together, and their friendship was indestructible. They could trust each other blindly and always rely on each other. To Cheyenne, Xaver was like a big brother. She tried to pull herself together and told him what had happened, how she overslept and hurried home, and what she found by the time she had arrived. And now I don't know where they are, and if they are even still alive. She saw in the green eyes of her childhood friend that he was now worried as well. Best is probably if we ask Rosie. Come on, that's what we'll do now. Then we'll know for sure. Cheyenne, before we're not certain about what happened here, we should just hope that it's a big misunderstanding and that the two of them are fine. Cheyenne admired the calmness of her friend. He stayed calm most of the time, especially in situations like these, and always knew exactly what to do. She thought herself very lucky that he was here. Xaver stared at her for a while, as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out of his mouth. Arukas whined a little and drew the attention of the two friends on him. He stood in front of Rosie's door already and scratched it. Some raindrops fell from his wet fur, and he had to blink all the time so the raindrops didn't get into his eyes. His senses hung down, and the ends of them laid on the stoned ground. Xaver and Cheyenne stepped closer to the wooden door, but before they could knock, the old lady already opened up. I heard the dog scratching at the door. The old woman confused the fairy wolf with a dog all the time ever since she knew him, even though Cheyenne kept on explaining how that was not the case. Are you here because of... She had to pause and gulped. Her voice sounded old and withered, smoky, shrill, and desperate, and it shook. The widow collected herself again and began to tell what had happened without waiting for Cheyenne and Xaver to ask her first. Your grandparents are gone. The knights... Again she gulped. The knights came here in the afternoon and collected taxes. Since your grandparents didn't have a good day at the market, there was no money left. These damned villains searched your entire house, but they found nothing valuable in their eyes. Then they took them with them. They said they're now sentenced to pay their debts on the human ranch. They took your grandparents. Cheyenne, I must deeply apologize. I couldn't do anything. But there was a moment when the knight's attention was distracted while searching the house, and in that moment your grandmother gave me this. She said that in case something would happen to her, I should give you this scroll, and you have to promise to take good care of it. With that being said, she ended her report and gave Cheyenne a small, slightly yellowed scroll. Without opening it, the girl thanked Rosie and said goodbye. She turned around and started running towards her horse. Xaver thanked and said goodbye as well, then hurried after his friend. "Wait, where are you going?" Cheyenne already sat on the drenched stallion. "Well, if they are at the human ranch, then they might be still alive. I will not give up on them as long as there is hope left that they might be still alive. I may be able to save them. It was my fault that they were indebted, and I could never pay taxes. They should not suffer for my misdemeanors." A thunder sounded loud and Falconheart reared. In the shine of the chroma lamp, Xaver could see how determined she was, and nobody could have stopped her from her plan. He always wanted to be as brave as his friend. "It's not your fault that you can't earn money, and it's not your fault either that they had to take care of you. And it's also not your fault that the harvest was so bad. Oh, please, just be reasonable for once and stay here. This is suicide." But Cheyenne didn't listen to his words, and while he was still trying to stop her, she chased off the yard with her horse. Arukas followed. Oh, sometimes she's so unreasonable. In the midst of the night, without any preparation, riding towards a certain death, just to help someone. Typical Cheyenne. But I won't let you go alone. Otherwise you won't stand a chance at all. At least someone must be smart here. Damn, why is everything always so complicated? Oh, come on, Shiva, let's hurry after them. Rosie was left behind, standing at her door. "Be careful, Cheyenne. You are so important to us all. Be on your guard, our last hope."